The first scream didn't come from him. It came from the woman standing 20 feet away, clutching her child, as two uniformed guards slammed his body against the cold marble wall. Evan Carter had been in this building hundreds of times. As a civil rights attorney, he had walked through these grand doors carrying evidence, arguing cases, fighting to make the system better. Tonight, though, the system had mistaken him for the enemy. Rain slicked the stone steps outside the state government building, reflecting the flashing red-blue lights of a patrol car parked askew at the curb. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the shouting. Some had their phones out. Some stood frozen, the way people do when they see something wrong but can't quite believe it's happening. "Sir, I'm telling you," Evan's voice was sharp but controlled, his hands already raised. "I'm an attorney. My ID is in my jacket." "Shut it," one of the guards barked, twisting his arm higher. The second guard kicked the leather briefcase at Evan's feet, scattering legal papers across the wet pavement. Some sheets clung to the rain, others skittered toward the gutter. The documents represented months of work that could have changed the outcome of a crucial discrimination case scheduled for hearing in less than 12 hours. And now, in a grim twist of irony, Evan was living the very injustice he fought against in court. A man in the crowd shouted, "Hey, he didn't do anything." The guards ignored it. One of them reached for the radio at his shoulder. Inside his head, Evan was doing math, not number seconds. How long until someone higher up intervened? How long until this spiraled beyond repair? He thought about the judge he was supposed to meet tonight. About his client, a young black woman wrongfully evicted from her apartment by a city official with too much power and too little accountability. He thought about how many times his father had warned him, "They won't care about your suit. They'll see what they want to see." The taller guard leaned in, his breath hot despite the cold. "We got a call about a suspicious black male loitering by the entrance." "That you?" Evan's jaw tightened. "That's me, except I'm not suspicious. I'm a lawyer working on a civil rights case. My name is Evan Carter. I work with the..." The guard didn't let him finish. "You can explain that downtown." From the corner of his eye, Evan spotted someone moving toward the senior woman in a gray skirt suit, high heels clicking against the stone. She had a security badge around her neck and the kind of confidence that made people get out of the way. It was Deputy Director Lisa Graham, one of the few people in this building who knew Evan by name. Her face shifted from irritation at the commotion to shock as she recognized him. "Stop," she snapped. "What the hell are you doing?" The guards hesitated, still holding Evan pinned. "Ma'am, we got a report." "I don't care what you got," Graham cut in, stepping closer. "This man is an officer of the court. He's here on official business. Release him. Now." The shorter guard's hand loosened from Evan's arm, but not before giving it a final, unnecessary twist. Evan straightened slowly, brushing rain off his suit, trying to gather whatever dignity was left in the moment. His briefcase lay open, its contents drenched. Lisa's gaze hardened. "Evan, I'm sorry. This should never have." "No," he interrupted, his voice low but steady. "It should not have happened. And it's not the first time something like this has happened in this city." Some of the crowd had begun filming more openly now. Whispers of lawsuit and racist moved through the air like electricity. The guards shifted uncomfortably under the weight of so many eyes. Lisa's tone softened, almost pleading. "Let's take this inside. You can dry off, and we'll get your files sorted." But Evan didn't move. Not yet. His mind was working faster than his heartbeat. This wasn't just about him. If he walked quietly inside, the story would end here, the public would move on, and the guards would go back to making the same assumptions tomorrow. The moment demanded something bigger. He turned to the crowd. "This," he said, raising his voice enough to cut through the rain, "is why we're in court tomorrow. This is why the law matters. Because if you're black in this city, you can be a lawyer standing on government steps and still get treated like a criminal. And if they can do it to Mesamion with a badge, a license, and a record of service, what do you think happens to the ones without?" There was a long silence. Then someone clapped. Others followed, the sound hesitant at first, then louder, until it became a wave of noise pushing against the cold marble. The guards stepped back fully now, their eyes downcast. Lisa touched Evan's elbow. "We really should get you inside." He looked at her, then at the crowd, then at the ruined papers on the ground. "I will," he said, "but not until someone takes the names of these guards, and not until a report is filed. This ends tonight in record." Lisa's jaw worked. She didn't like public confrontations. It wasn't her way. But she nodded, pulled out her phone, and began speaking rapidly into it. Evan bent down, gathering what papers he could. Most were unreadable now, the ink bleeding into the rainwater. But he would find another way. He always did. Because the fight was bigger than one hearing, one case, one ruined night. It was about making sure no matter their skin color had to explain, while being cuffed, that they belonged. And tonight, he had witnesses. Lisa Graham's phone call drew in a flood of activity. 2 building supervisors arrived within minutes, their expressions tight, like people who knew a scandal had just landed on their doorstep. They began speaking in low, clipped tones, occasionally glancing at the soaked lawyers standing in the rain with a crowd watching. Evan didn't flinch. If anything, the attention seemed to steal him. He had been through depositions tougher than this, had faced opposing counsels who would twist his words into knots. But this moment was different, more personal. One of the supervisors approached him. "Mr. Carter, we'd like to apologize for the misunderstanding." Misunderstanding? Evan's voice carried over the crowd. "You think this is about misunderstanding? This is about profiling. This is about 2 armed men deciding I look like a suspect instead of a lawyer. You don't get to rewrite what just happened." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone muttered, "Tell him." The taller guard, the one who had first grabbed him, shifted his weight, glancing toward the other. His lips tightened, as though he wanted to defend himself, but knew anything he said now would just pour gasoline on the fire. Lisa stepped in before things could spiral further. "Evan, please. Let's bring this inside before the media." Too late. A voice called from the back of the crowd. A young woman in a red coat stepped forward, holding a DSLR camera. Channel 8 is already live-streaming this. Evan felt a grim satisfaction. Good. Let the city see. Let them decide whether a lawyer in a suit, holding legal documents, could still be considered a threat just for existing. Finally, he allowed Lisa to guide him toward the doors. The crowd parted like a tide, phones still raised. Every flash of a camera felt like a piece of evidence being preserved. Inside, the air was warmer but thick with tension. Marble floors gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. A security desk sat near the entrance, and the 2 guards who had detained him remained just outside, clearly not eager to follow. Lisa led him to a conference room on the 2nd floor. Once the door closed, she exhaled hard. "Evan, I don't even know where to start. I can tell you there's going to be an internal review." "Internal reviews don't fix this," he said. "They write it up, shuffle some paperwork, and the same thing happens again. I've seen it before. I've represented the people it happens to." She pulled a chair out for him, but he stayed standing. His wet clothes clung uncomfortably to his skin. "Look," she began carefully, "I know you want justice. And you'll get it. But if you blow this up too big—" "It is big," Evan cut in. "And the only reason we're in this room right now instead of a holding cell is because you recognized me. Imagine if I was just another black man without a connection to this building. Do you think we'd be having this conversation? Or would I be downtown, trying to convince someone to look at the ID they already confiscated?" Lisa didn't answer. She didn't have to. Evan stepped closer to the table, planting his hands on it. "Tomorrow's hearing is about a city official abusing his power to push a black tenant out of her home. Do you think this incident doesn't prove exactly why that case matters?" Her eyes flickered. "It certainly doesn't help the city's image." "That's not what I'm talking about," he said. "This isn't about image. It's about reality. And reality is ugly. What happened tonight is Exhibit A." Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young man in a navy blazer stepped nervous, eyes darting between them. "Mr. Carter," he began, "I'm with the governor's communications office. The governor is aware of the incident and would like to speak with you privately." Evan let out a humorless laugh. "The governor suddenly cares about my evening stroll?" Lisa gave him a sharp look. "Evan." He shook his head. "Fine. Lead the way." They were escorted down a long hallway lined with portraits of past governors, every single one of them white. It wasn't lost on him that he stood out here in more ways than one. The governor's office was large, polished, and deliberately intimidating. Governor Allen Whitford rose from behind his desk as they entered. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the kind of handshake that politicians use to telegraph power. "Mr. Carter," Whitford began, gesturing to his seat. "I've heard there's been an incident." Evan stayed standing. "That's one way to put it." Whitford gave a practiced half-smile. I want you to know I take matters of civil rights very seriously. I also want to assure you this doesn't reflect the values of my administration. Evan raised an eyebrow. Values aren't what you say on record, Governor. They're what happens when no one's watching. Tonight, people were watching and what they saw was two guards treat a black man like a suspect for standing on the steps of his own government. Whitford's smile faltered. I understand your frustration. Do you? Evan asked. Because tomorrow morning, I'll be in court proving that discrimination isn't just a relic of the past, it's happening right now, under your watch. And you can bet this little scene will be part of the record. The governor's chief of staff, a wiry man in glasses, stepped forward quickly. Mr. Carter, perhaps we can discuss an arrangement. Evan turned toward him, cutting him off. The only arrangement I'm interested in is accountability. I want a public acknowledgement of what happened tonight. I want those guards suspended pending investigation. And I want this building to start mandatory bias training for every single person with a badge or a gun. Whitford leaned back, studying him. That's a bold list of demands. It's the bare minimum, Evan replied. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Then the governor gave a slow nod. You'll have my statement by morning. I can't promise more until the investigation. Then I'll see you in court, Evan said, turning toward the door. Lisa caught up to him in the hallway. You realize you just picked a fight with the most powerful man in the state. Evan glanced at her. He started at the moment he let a culture exist where what happened tonight was possible. Back in the conference room, Evan finally sat down, peeling his wet jacket off. His phone buzzed 3 missed calls from a reporter he knew. Then a fourth, this time from his client, Kendra. He answered immediately. Kendra. Her voice was tight. I saw the live stream. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said, though his muscles ached from the rough handling. But it might actually help our case. The whole city just got a front row seat to what you've been telling the court. There was a pause. You think they'll care? He looked toward the rain-streaked window. Some will. Enough to make a difference? We'll find out. By midnight, the clip had gone viral. Social media was split, as it always was, half outraged, half insisting there must have been more to the story. Evan had heard that refrain his entire career. But this time, there was video. Clear, undeniable video. And tomorrow, he would walk into court not just as a lawyer, but as living evidence. Morning came with a brittle chill, the kind that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. Evan barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the marble wall loomed in his mind, the guard's voice echoing. We got a call about a suspicious black male. But when he stepped out of the cab and onto the courthouse steps, he looked every inch the trial lawyer, dark charcoal suit, polished shoes, and a fresh briefcase replacing the one ruined by rain. His shoulders were squared, his chin lifted. The courthouse plaza was packed. Protesters held signs. Justice for Kendra. In racial profiling now, law is not just for the privileged. Television cameras lined the edges, reporters shouting questions. Mr. Carter, do you think last night's incident proves your case? Will you be suing the state separately? Do you believe the governor is complicit? He didn't break stride. I believe the facts speak for themselves, he said, pushing through the security checkpoint. Inside, the air buzzed with a different kind of electricity, tighter, heavier. The gallery benches were already full. Kendra sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped tightly. She was dressed modestly but sharply, her dark eyes flashing both gratitude and fear when she saw him. You ready? He asked, taking his seat. As I'll ever be, she replied. The defense table across the aisle was occupied by 2 suited attorneys, and, at its center, Councilman Richard Vance, the man accused of using his office to force Kendra out of her apartment building so a developer friend could buy it for pennies. Vance's smirk was the same one Evan had seen in deposition, a combination of arrogance and boredom, like this whole process was a formality before his inevitable win. The judge entered, and the room rose. Judge Monroe was known for her sharp tongue and intolerance for theatrics. Evan respected her. He also knew she wouldn't save him from an aggressive defense. The opening statements began. The defense went first. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the lead defense attorney said, pacing with deliberate calm, my client is a respected public servant. The plaintiff's claims are not only unfounded theory, a distraction from the real issues this city faces. We will show that Councilman Vance acted within the law at all times, and that Ms. Harris's eviction was due to documented lease violations, not discrimination. Evan kept his face neutral, but inside, he was cataloging each word for later dismantling. When it was his turn, he rose slowly, walking to the center of the courtroom. He didn't glance at his notes. Yesterday, my client was an ordinary citizen fighting an extraordinary injustice. Today, she is proof of a truth we'd rather not admit, that in this city, where you live, work, and belong can still be decided by the color of your skin. He paused, letting the words settle. Some of you may have seen the news last night. Some of you may not have. But the principle is the same. When those with power choose to see threat instead of humanity, the law is not just a weapon. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the jury leaning in. Good. Kendra was the first witness. She described how, after years in her apartment with no issues, she suddenly began receiving violation notices for things like excessive noise when she was at work or improper garbage disposal when she'd been out of town. Then came the eviction notice. They wanted me gone, she said plainly, and they made sure to find a reason. The defense pressed her on her lease terms, implying she had failed to comply. She held firm. Then Evan called his surprise witness, a neighbor from Kendra's building, an elderly white woman named Mrs. Daly. She shuffled to the stand with a cane, her voice trembling but clear. I've lived there 30 years. Nobody bothered me. Nobody wrote me up for my grandson playing music. But Kendra? They were after her from the day she moved in. The defense objected, claiming hearsay, but Judge Monroe allowed it, noting it went to pattern and practice. By midday, Evan knew the jury was with him. But the defense wasn't done. They pulled out their own surprise, surveillance stills of Evan being detained outside the government building the night before. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Mr. Carter, the defense attorney said with a smirk, would you care to explain why you were stopped by armed guards last night? Evan stood, unflinching. Gladly. I was stopped because I'm a black man standing outside a building I've entered 100 times. I was detained because bias doesn't stop at the courthouse door. And thanks to a crowd of witnesses, it's all on video. He turned to the jury. If they can do it to Mesamion with a badge, a license, and a record of service, what do you think happens to people like my client, who don't have the same visibility? The defense attorney's smirk faded. Judge Monroe cleared her throat. Counselor, I trust you're not introducing unrelated events purely for character impeachment. The defense stammered. We were establishing context, Your Honor. Context received, the judge replied dryly. And so noted by the jury. The afternoon brought more witnesses, each one reinforcing the pattern of targeting Kendra while ignoring similar actions by white tenants. Evan felt the momentum building. But the real explosion came when he called his final witness, a former aide to Councilman Vance. The man, mid-30s, with nervous hands, glanced around before speaking. I was told to find ways to clear out certain tenants from the building. We were given a list. Evan stepped closer. And what was the common factor among those tenants? They were all black, the aide said, his voice cracking. The jury went still. Vance's face reddened, his attorney whispering furiously in his ear. Evan pressed on. And did Councilman Vance approve this list? Yes. He signed off on every name. The judge called for order as murmurs swelled. By the time court adjourned for the day, the press was waiting outside. Evan didn't stop for interviews. Kendra walked beside him, her shoulders lighter than they'd been in weeks. You think we've got them? She asked quietly. I think, he said, we've given them no place to hide. That night, the governor's office released a public statement acknowledging both the incident with Evan and the deeply troubling testimony from the trial. Whitford promised a full investigation into racial bias in city housing practices and security protocols at state buildings. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but it was a crack in the armor. And Evan intended to split it wide open. The last day of trial drew an even bigger crowd than before. By now, the city was hooked. The media had labeled it the Carter case, framing it as a defining moment for racial justice in state politics. The jury filed in, faces unreadable. Evan sat beside Kendra, his hands folded, calm on the outside. Inside, every nerve hummed. Judge Monroe looked to the foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. The courtroom fell into a hush, so deep it felt like the air itself had paused. In the matter of Harris versus Vance, the foreperson read, we find in favor of the plaintiff. Kendra's breath caught. The foreperson continued, we award compensatory damages in the amount of $450,000 and punitive damages in the amount of $1.2 million. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, even a few cheers from the gallery. Councilman Vance's mouth tightened into a thin, bloodless line. His attorney's eyes darted like a trapped animal. Evan allowed himself one slow exhale. He placed a steady hand on Kendra's shoulder. You just made history, he whispered. Outside, the courthouse steps had transformed into a rally. Chants of justice for all. An end profiling rolled through the air. Microphones and cameras jutted forward. Evan didn't give a speech. He let Kendra stand in front of them, her voice trembling but strong. This case wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's been told they don't belong in their own home, in their own city. Today, the jury said we do belong. All of us. The crowd roared. That evening, as Evan returned to his office, he found an email from the governor's office marked urgent. He opened it. Mr. Carter. Effective immediately, the 2 security guards involved in the incident on the night of date have been placed on administrative leave pending termination review. A public apology will be issued tomorrow morning. Evan stared at the words. The irony wasn't lost on him. The very men who had profiled him had now lost their jobs because their actions proved, in vivid detail, the very discrimination he fought to expose. Still, he didn't feel triumphant. Justice, when it came, always carried a bittersweet taste. 2 jobs lost didn't erase the years of bias that had made such profiling instinctive. He closed the laptop and sat back, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, another person was being judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character. His work wasn't done out even close. The next morning, the governor stood in front of the press. Cameras clicked like machine gun fire. What happened to Mr. Carter was unacceptable, Whitford said, his voice measured. It was the result of systemic issues that this administration will address with urgency. We are implementing mandatory bias training for all state security personnel and initiating an independent review of our housing enforcement policies. A reporter shouted, Governor, do you think the verdict in Harris versus Vance influenced your decision? Whitford hesitated, just a fraction of a second. I think the truth influenced my decision, he said. And the truth is, we failed. The clip aired on every local channel that night. Weeks later, Evan walked those same marble steps again, not in handcuffs, not under suspicion, but as a guest speaker for a new diversity and inclusion program for state employees. The atrium was packed with guards, clerks, aides, and administrators. He stood at the podium, scanning the crowd. In the back corner, he spotted the 2 guards who had detained him that night, now in plain clothes, awaiting the official end of their employment. Their faces were stone, unreadable. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, Evan began. I'm here because change doesn't happen from punishment alone. It happens when people see the harm they've done and choose to do better. He told them about Kendra, about Mrs. Daly, about the aide who came forward, about the trial, the verdict, the fallout, and about that night in the rain, when the system decided he was a threat instead of an ally. When you looked at me, he said, you saw danger. When I looked at you, I saw people who had been taught to see danger where there was none. We can change that, but only if you want to. Silence followed. Then, slowly, a single person in the front row began to clap. Others joined. Outside, as he left the building, a young black law student approached him, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Carter, I saw what happened to you. I saw how you fought back. I want to do what you do. Evan smiled. Then do it better than me. She grinned. That's the plan. As she walked away, Evan felt the weight in his chest ease just a little. The fight was endless, yes, but every win, no matter how small, lit another torch for someone else to carry. And sometimes that was enough. In the end, the story of Harris versus Vance became a landmark case, cited in legal arguments across the state. Kendra used part of her settlement to start a tenants' rights nonprofit. The governor's administration implemented reforms imperfect, but a start. As for Evan, he kept walking into buildings where some people still looked at him with suspicion. The difference now was that he knew more eyes than ever were watching back. Because of one rainy night, 2 reckless guards, and a mistake they would never forget, the city had been forced to confront its reflection in the harshest light. And in that reflection, For the first time in a long while, there was a chance for change. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.